I thought they were free speech people. Stop with that. You sound stupid. When people really push these guys say they're free speech, but then somebody goes and takes their intellectual property and suddenly they're not about free speech. Well, that's not what anybody's saying. Nobody's saying you should be able to take other people's content and use it. That's not stopping your speech. That's stopping you from using their content that they paid to produce, that they paid to have edited, that they paid for the entire process, start to finish, which there's a lot behind the scenes. Any content creator, big or small, will tell you as far as everything it takes to get this from just being recorded to actually being on YouTube. It's a process. So to think that people aren't going to be at all protective of their intellectual property or the way that they make money is absolutely ridiculous. My friend Tim Dillon issued a copyright strike against a small YouTube channel, and we're going to talk about it. What's up, everybody? Ty Rivera here, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world. Obviously, taking a break from working on cars. It's kind of what I do, if you didn't know. There's dogs barking in the background. I keep telling you guys I'm Mexican. I don't know what you guys don't get about that. Anyway, I saw the thing by Too Lazy to Try is the name of the smaller channel, and I'm sorry about the dog barking, but I have nothing to do with that dog, and I don't have another place to record right now. But I did think it was important that I talk about this because I saw Tim Dillon over the weekend at Skankfest, so I thought that this would be a good thing for me to talk about. Because on, I think it was Monday, I was just looking on YouTube, and I subscribed to Too Lazy to Try, so this isn't any kind of takedown. If you're not familiar, it's a guy that makes video content about comedy-related stuff. Brendan Schaub, Tim Dillon, obviously, H3H3, and I really like his content. I subscribe to all of his notifications, so obviously that's how I saw that he had posted in his community. He got a copyright strike from Tim Dillon. He's making it seem like it was Tim Dillon that did it, and I can tell you as a person that actually is friends with Tim Dillon, I've been on 2 of the Patreon episodes, if you didn't know. Also at Skankfest, we were not just hanging out like at Skankfest, we also went to lunch. Tim Dillon is my actual friend, so I'm just trying to make that clear so people know that when I talk about this, I do have a little more insight than the average person, and I will tell you that Tim Dillon doesn't handle any of that stuff. So when you're really saying Tim Dillon is coming after you, that's not the way it works. There are people that handle that, and I always thought, because I did see the episode that he was talking about, like I said, I watch all of Too Lazy to Try stuff, and I remember thinking when I was watching it, I wonder how he's using part of what's obviously a Patreon episode in his content. I personally myself am a small content creator, and I had always just assumed anything that was behind a paywall, i.e. on Patreon, would be off limits, because that's one of the things with fair use is you can't affect the market for the particular content that you're putting out or that you're sharing. And if it's behind a paywall, that's obviously the point of it, is that the only way to get that content is to pay for it. So if you use somebody's content that's behind a paywall, I would think that you should pretty much expect that there's a good chance that that's what's going to happen. I don't know if Too Lazy to Try doesn't understand that, but that is what it is. Also, like I was saying, Tim Dillon, as much as everybody would like to think in their head that he's actually reading through comments and hearing everything you guys are saying, that's not at all the way that Tim Dillon works. And I know different people have different opinions about Tim Dillon and the way that his show's running. Ben Avery leaving, which technically I've known Ben longer than I've known Tim. I met Ben doing the shittiest open mics, and I'm not putting Ben down because we were both doing the shittiest open mics in LA when I met Ben Avery. But as far as all that stuff goes, I just wanted to say really quick, I think people are being unfair because I'm friends with Ben and Tim. I don't hang out with them all the time, but I am friends with both of them. As far as Tim goes and people saying, I can't believe you turned out to be this person, let me tell you this about Tim Dillon. Tim Dillon is exactly the guy that he presents to be on his podcast. So when people talk about celebrities not being authentic, not showing us their real selves and hiding behind this persona, Tim Dillon is not one of those people. So if you like Tim Dillon on the podcast and you support the guy that you're watching on the podcast, then you support Tim Dillon in real life. People ask me all the time, what's Tim Dillon like in real life? Tim Dillon is exactly like he is on his podcast in real life. But at the same time, Tim is a very genuine guy. So while he may not be the most emotionally touchy-feely guy, guy. He is a very caring guy. He's a very genuine guy. And I would prefer a Tim Dillon over many of the celebrity comics that I've met, many of the celebrity comics that I actually know, because a lot of your guys' favorite comics that you guys think are a particular way, when you meet them in real life, are not at all that. There are some people that pretend to be super nice in their public persona, but then you meet them in real life and they're the complete opposite. With Tim, what you see is what you get. And who could ask for anything better than that? We talked a little bit about the situation with Ben, and let me say, when he says that he offered Ben a lot of money, he offered Ben a lot of money. And he did call Ben the giggler on that one, and people thought that it was super insensitive. And had I been offered the money that Ben got offered to continue to be a giggler, I gotta admit, I would have been a giggler. I would let you call me the giggler to my face. I would have it on my door of my office. It would say, Ty Rivera, giggler. I would be the giggler for that kind of money. So kudos to Ben Avery. He admits that that was not necessarily a mistake, but it didn't come out the right way. And some people took that a particular way. But what you have to remember is that there is an element to it that has to be fun. It has to be entertaining. So yeah, sometimes when you're doing this kind of thing, because I've been guilty of it too with people that I've worked with, you will treat the people around you almost like they're props. You won't necessarily be the most sensitive when you're in the process of shooting, or when you're in the process of recording, or in your wording when you're doing that. But that's because you're thinking about the funniest way to get from A to B. So that's what Tim was doing in that instance. He was just trying to say things in the funniest way, the most entertaining way, and not really thinking about anybody's feelings or the fact that everybody was going to read into that as Ben was just a giggler. Nobody with any intelligence, I should say, thinks that Ben was just a giggler. Ben is really great at what he does. Clearly, that show wouldn't be what it is without Ben, and I'm sure Tim would admit that. They both built something really great. Maybe it's ran its course as far as the two of them working together. Maybe at some point they'll end up patching it up. I don't know. On that, I have no inside information. I'm not trying to give you guys any kind of false hope. I'm not saying that that's what's going on. I'm just saying, I personally, as a fan, that's the other thing you guys have to know about me. I am a fan of the Tim Dillon Show. I don't watch any podcast at all, and I became a fan of the podcast before I became friends with Tim the way that I'm friends with him now. I just really love that podcast. I would watch it on Sundays for cheat day for a long time there, and then I switched him to being my personal trainer on Mondays because sometimes I need that Monday motivation. But I watch the Tim Dillon Show, listen to Tim Dillon Show every single week. So I talk as a fan when I'm talking about the show, and I as a fan know that it took Tim and Ben to make that show what it is, and I know that Tim knows what Ben did for the show more than anybody else does. But yeah, as far as that goes, I absolutely love Ben Avery, and I think he's great too, and I can't wait to see what he actually does on his own. I sent him a text message because you guys have no idea. I have to separate myself from being a fan and being a friend, because as a fan of the show, I wanted to get on three-way with both of them and be like, you guys are ruining my life right now. You guys know you're the only podcast I've watched. I've talked about it with you guys before. I think I mentioned it on an episode. I don't know what you guys are doing right now, but instead I have to just keep it to myself. I did send Ben a message when I saw that he had posted that he was leaving the show or had left the show. I did send him a text message, and it was just like, hey, not trying to be nosy, but did you actually leave the show? Because I was like you guys, I was hoping it was a bit. Ben sent me back a quick text message that just said no longer with the show. I sent him a message back that just said I'm excited to see what he does next and good luck with everything. And you know, I'm not going anywhere. Me and Ben are still friends. Me and Tim are still friends. On that part, I mind my business, because when people work together for that long and they work together all the time like they were working together, because they were working together on so many fronts, and Ben's having to travel everywhere and he's married at the same time, and Tim is living a single gay man's life, but he's super busy himself. And so when people are in that kind of relationship together, nobody that's outside of that relationship can really have any kind of real guess on what it was that's going on behind the scenes. It's just sort of one of those things where you just have to let it be what it is. I mean, like I said, me and Tim did talk about it a little bit. He mentioned that he's definitely learned some lessons from this situation and the way that he treats people and the way that he talks to people, and I hope that that isn't me violating his trust in me saying that, but I'm the king of minding my business when it comes to a lot of these things. So anything anybody wants to tell me, they're free to tell me, but at the same time, I'm not the kind of person that's just going to keep digging and be like, well, what happened with this? And what about this? And what about that? And that's not my place. I'm not that kind of friend. But I think that it's important that somebody at least say, look, you guys, I get it that it's nice to make somebody into the villain. I get it that it feels good to be like, oh, we hate this guy. He's not what we thought he was. But I want to tell you guys, just as a friend, that the way that you guys are presenting it isn't necessarily what it is when they just paint it like Tim's a complete villain, Ben's a complete victim. We all know how friendships and relationships work, and that's not the way that it ever works in any friendship or any relationship. There always are the three sides to the story. Like they say, the one person side, the other person side, and then there's the truth somewhere in the middle. So that's the way I feel about it, just to give you guys a little bit of my insight and what I think. Anyway, this has been Ty Rivera, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world.